Hello everyone, P41 here. So this will be part 2 of the mini bikes. Today I'm going to focus on getting this one ready for a proper trail ride. The other one's pretty much ready. The only thing I've done since last time that I didn't show is I cleaned the carburetors in both of them. Now the other one cleaned up pretty well. It runs nicely now. This one, however, did not. It turns out someone was in there before me and they stripped out the main jet, so I can't actually get it out and clean it properly, so it will only run on half choke still, and it still runs very poorly. So we have a new carburetor to put on there. We're also going to be taking care of that air filter box. We got a new throttle to go on here and replace this garbage. But the big thing is that tire and bearing. So we've got a new tire right there to replace the bald one. I've got some new bearings. Now the biggest thing is that we need to get new bearings in here, because right now the way it is, it's just flopping all over the place, and because of that I can't actually get this chain to stay tight, so it keeps kicking off of the sprocket and jamming up and causing all sorts of problems. And while we have that off, might as well put a new tire on it. So let's get to it. Just pound it out, and that came out very easily. And drive it in. And it's all seated. So the new bearings are in, and we've got a nice brand new tire on there with lots of tread left that's not bald. So it should actually get some decent traction now. And now, of course, since the bearings are no longer flopping all over the place, I can now tighten up the chain appropriately. Got the brakes back on. The brakes were in pretty good shape, so we don't have to worry about those. They're good for a long time. So next thing we're going to work on is the throttle. I'm going to get rid of this junk, and maybe, just maybe, it'll stop sticking wide open so I won't kill myself. Junk. New throttle's on. I ended up having to use the old throttle cable. This is actually the original Baja throttle cable, and it's the same design as the new one, so it fit in there without any issues. The reason I had to use that one is because the cable simply didn't extend far enough out at the end to meet up with the set screw properly, so it was just easier to use the old one, which is fine. It's not in bad condition. So our throttle works now. Nice twist throttle, none of that brake handle garbage, and it even returns to idle. So that's nice. So the next thing I want to address is these horrible foot pegs. So rather than just replacing them with the same junk that's on there, I'm actually going to put on some of these CBR 1000RR foot pegs. I believe these are meant to fit like an 04 to 18. Don't quote me on that though. There will be links to this in the description. So yeah, they might require a slight bit of modifications, but other than that, they should be pretty much a bolt-on. So that fits quite nicely. I think I might trim it down so that it's a little more even. But other than that, I think it's pretty good. foot pegs are in. I ended up reusing the stock Baja pin because the new ones are a bit longer than the old ones. Also, the Baja pin uses a cotter pin instead of an E-clip, which I think will probably be a bit more secure in this application. I haven't modified the peg at all. I opted not to. The only thing I've modified is I rounded off this corner a bit on the mount, if you can see that. And the only reason you have to do that is so that the peg will clear it when it rotates upwards. So that's the only thing that I modified. It's got the spring in there, so now if you lay it down, it'll fold up, and as soon as you pick it back up, it folds back down. A lot more secure, a lot nicer than the old one. They do come with these little kind of nubs that are supposed to thread into the bottom of the peg here, like so. I presume that the intention for those was, since this is for a street bike, if you lay the bike down, those nubs will hit the concrete and do less damage. But because this is an off-road application, I'm going to leave them out, because if you lay this down in the dirt with those nubs on there, they're just going to dig into the ground and cause more problems. So I'm just going to leave them off. Definitely an upgrade I would recommend. Very easy, very quick, and it's way better than the old one. It's not hard to see why the old ones fail. They're just made out of stamped steel, and they rely on a tight fit between all these parts to stay straight. And since it's stamped steel, the holes waller out, and the end ends up being smashed down, and so it doesn't take long for them to start sitting crooked. So definitely would recommend doing that if you have one of these mini bikes. So moving on, next thing I'm going to do is we're going to swap out this carburetor. We also need to swap out the insulator because that has a few cracks in it, and then take care of this airbox. So this insulator is actually from the other bike. It's a little bit cracked, and I knew that this one was going to have to come off anyway, so I swapped them. It's not cracked enough to cause issues with the running, but it will cause issues eventually, so we're replacing this as well. So the carburetor that originally came on this engine is a Huai. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but that's a brand that I see a lot on these Honda clone engines. Now the carburetor I've got to replace is just a generic carburetor from Amazon. I think it was like 14 bucks. Now a lot of people like these carburetors. I personally am not a huge fan, because even just the difference between this no-name carburetor and the Huai that came on this engine is pretty noticeable to me. But as I mentioned earlier, the main jet is damaged on this carburetor, and I can't extract it, but that's going to take a bit of time, and I really want to get this engine running because I am on a limited time frame. So for now, we're just going to put this $14 carburetor on it, and it should work fine for now. But in the future, I will definitely probably be fixing the other carburetor, either as a backup or to swap back out, and then this will be the backup. I'm not sure yet. Where are you trying to go? Okay, let's take care of the airbox. So this is the original airbox. It uses a paper filter element with a foam pre-filter, just like the Hondas use. It's in pretty rough shape. The upper filter box is not actually connected to the lower intake. It's supposed to be connected with 2 screws and sealed with a nice gasket, but it's not. It was just in pieces when I got it. We're also missing the inserts that go into these mounting bosses where it mounts to the carburetor. So I ordered a new air filter housing, and this was a cheap filter housing, but honestly I'm not happy with it at all. There's multiple issues I'm seeing. The inserts are just absolutely paper thin. They're not going to provide like any support at all. But the big thing that got me is this filter design. Now I don't mind when they copy the original design, but sometimes they pull this crap where they come up with their own design, which is cheaper, and it's just absolutely horrible. So instead they've just got some foam in here. Now there's nothing wrong with a foam filter, but this filter media weighs nothing, and foam doesn't usually have much weight, but this literally weighs nothing. It's just garbage foam, and you can just tell by looking at it. It's ultra coarse. This isn't going to filter very well at all. And then of course the manufacturing quality is subpar. We've got manufacturing defects in there. So even though it was cheap, I'm not happy with that at all. So instead I'm going to actually fix the original airbox. So what I needed to do is I need to create some new inserts for these holes. I'm going to reseal this top where this gasket is with some RTV, and we'll get some screws to resecure the upper airbox to the lower intake, and it should be good to go. So we're going to start with the inserts. Now I happen to find this tube that's the right size. This is from a Briggs & Stratton Quantum. This is the breather tube, and it fits in there very nicely, so this should do. It is aluminum instead of steel, so not perfect, but it'll work, and it'll be a lot better than the way it was before. So we'll just get this trimmed up and press those in there. Alright, let's move on to the upper seal. So this is the seal that came out of it. You can see it's broken. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in there. Now this of course by itself will not be able to seal, but it will help fill in that gap. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill in that gap with some of this ultra gray RTV, and this RTV is what's going to be actually providing the seal. At this point that gasket is mostly just for taking up space. Now we got our nice bead for RTV. This RTV is going to be doing all the sealing. You can see there's a ridge here. I'll push down on that so it'll get a nice good seal. I'll set this back together now. And I dug through my hoard, found some screws that fit very nicely. Alright, you can see squeezed out the RTV all the way around so we know it filled in nicely. I'll probably just wipe a little bit of that up, clean it up a little bit, and this will be ready to go back on the engine. Air filter and carburetor are on. We got our new throttle, foot pegs, bearings in the rear end. I think it's about ready to hit the trails. So that's going to do it for this video. Any parts I use will be listed in the description down below. Be sure to tune in next time. We're going to take these things out to the trails, see what they've got. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to see that. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below.